on Plugged In. Heat waves sweeping across Western Europe, North America, and Africa, impacting the Arctic and Greenland, where nearly 200 billion tons of ice have melted into the North Atlantic. All this after the hottest July on record. Scientists warning global sea levels are rising, food crops are dwindling, and a record number of animal species are dying. Is it too late to change course? Or is there still time to save the planet? On climate change, the growing threat. Hello and welcome to Plugged In. I'm Greta Van Susteren. Weather extremes no longer just a scientific hypothesis, now our reality. Just last month, 400 died in the Netherlands, more than 18,000 hospitalized in Japan, and from North America to parts of Asia to the continent of Africa, a new grim warning: heat-related deaths are on the rise. And now a new United Nations study released after the hottest July ever recorded, warning that climate change is not only going to impact our weather, but it's going to hit humanity where it really hurts: food. As Plugged In's Mil Arcega reports, our warming planet could devastate our food crops and raise the specter of increased hunger around the world.
Greenland's ice sheet is melting, nearly 200 billion tons of it flowing back into the Atlantic in the month of July. The melting ice has caused sea levels to rise, fueling stronger cyclones, hurricanes, and deadly floods in China, Pakistan, and India. In the western African country of Guinea, it's rainy season, but farmers here say there's been no rain.
Climate change has caused a shortage of rain, and as we are not getting any rainfall, it is very difficult for us to farm. We cannot plant our rice seeds because of the lack of rainfall.
A new UN study says future climate extremes are likely to impact not just how we farm, but how much food we have to eat.
Despite increasing food production, an estimated 821 million people are undernourished. In general, climate change will cause declined yields, increased prices, reduced nutrition levels, and disruption in supply chains for food.
Besides disrupting the world's food supplies, climate change caused by the burning of fossil fuels are projected to produce bouts of severe drought and flash flooding, like this one in Uganda last year that killed dozens of people.
We found that those sort of events, which are typically, say, once every 30 years now, could be as frequent as once every 3 to 4 years in the future.
All this from what the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says was just a 1 degree Celsius rise in the world's mean temperature since the start of the industrial age. It may not seem like much, but scientists say it will take a coordinated global effort to reduce the buildup of greenhouse gases, which trap heat and cause temperatures to rise.
Limiting global warming to 1.5 or even 2 degrees will involve removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and land has a critical role to play in carbon dioxide removal.
The World Meteorological Organization reports that the month of July, which saw record heat waves across the globe, has already rewritten the world's climate history books. But scientists say the greatest impact in coming decades will be felt in the poorest parts of the world, where the capacity and the ability to deal with climate extremes is limited. Mil Arcega, VOA News, Washington.
In 2017, President Donald Trump pulled the United States out of the 2015 Paris Accord, the global climate change agreement. Trump said the Paris Accord would have a negative impact on the U.S. economy, and he further insisted it would place unfair standards on American efforts to lower greenhouse gas emissions. He left open the possibility to negotiate a better deal for the U.S. Joining us is VOA science correspondent Steve Baragona. Steve has been looking at how climate change is impacting our lives and how some industries are coping. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Glad to be here.
But first, we go to the question about what industry is doing about coping. You've just come back from the state of Wyoming. Why were you there?
Yeah, so coal is a major industry in Wyoming, and coal is a major contributor to greenhouse gases. In the U.S., power plants are stopping burning coal for the most part. They're turning to natural gas and to a large extent now renewables. And this is now starting to hit the people of Wyoming pretty hard. In certain industries, In certain towns, coal is pretty much all there is. And so now they have to start thinking about what they're going to do as kind of the era of coal starts to wind down.
I learned talking to you before the show, it's 40% of the coal in the United States comes from Wyoming. And if this is going to hit their economy so hard, do the people of Wyoming, do they have more attention on job loss or on what coal does to the greenhouse gases?
Greenhouse gases are not a major concern for most of the folks that I talk to there. And you kind of get the sense from, when you go to Wyoming, I mean, the landscape is so huge that you kind of get the sense, you kind of understand why they wouldn't see the impact as much, because you'll have these coal-fired power plants out in the middle of nowhere in some place in Wyoming. And you know, the sky is crystal clear and they just don't see the pollution, and they don't, a lot of the folks that I talked to didn't understand that the pollutant that we're talking about is a colorless, odorless gas. So they just don't see that how this could be an impact on the planet when they don't see it locally.
All right, now let's broaden out. What's going on in the United States in industry as we face climate change issues?
Well, the electric power industry is actually making some pretty remarkable changes over the last several years. They're getting away from coal, as I mentioned. Natural gas is becoming a big deal. In a lot of places, renewables have become the cheapest form of electricity. So cheaper than coal, cheaper than natural gas even. So you're starting to see these 100% renewable goals set up by states that are starting to look not quite completely feasible, but more realistic than they did even 5 years ago. It's been really astonishing for people in the industry, even how quickly renewables have moved to a point where they're seriously economically competitive with coal and natural gas.
Well, what's the barrier that they're not feasible?
Well, okay, so you can, from folks that I've talked to, say you can get to about 80% renewables without too much trouble. The problem comes when you've got seasonal problems. Let's say you're in, say, Massachusetts, where they've got a huge and growing solar industry. In the summer, that's great. In the winter, they don't get a lot of sunshine in Massachusetts, so they're putting in a lot of battery power.
They may get some wind, though.
They may get some wind. And the problem is there will be times when those sources of energy will not be there for all the time. So you need to have some kind of backup that can cover you on those occasions when you need to keep the lights on and the batteries have run out.
Well, I guess that brings me to my next question is the storage.
Yeah.
That seems to be a huge hurdle, is that it is trying to get the storage to the point where it is no longer an issue if the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. And
they're getting there. They're getting there, and they're getting there quickly. And the price of batteries has come down tremendously. But again, there aren't...
But do the batteries work? I mean, we want the batteries to be more potent.
The batteries work, and the batteries do their job tremendously well. The problem is when you, it's really hard to have battery storage that will get you through, say, a week or 2 weeks when you've got a really cloudy period, or when the wind isn't blowing for that entire long stretch of time. There are certain things like pumped hydroelectric storage that might get you through. This involves basically building a reservoir, and you pump the water up when you've got the electricity to spare. And when you need the electricity, you let the water flow downhill, and you basically run a hydroelectric turbine. That can work. There's a lot of research going on to try to develop these kinds of long-term storage solutions. The research is there. The products are not quite there yet. We can get 80% of the way there.
Is the government's heart there in mind to do this, our government?
At the moment, no. There's a lot of interest in the private sector. There's companies that are really interested in getting this done. The power industry, again, there's a company called Excel in the western U.S. that is really looking to go 100% carbon-free. And they recognize that they need some kind of long-term storage technology. So they really want to see this happen.
Steve, thank you. Steve Barragona, VOA science correspondent. The Amazon rainforest of South America has been referred to at times as the lungs of the planet, and with good reason. Spanning an area of 2,300,000 square miles, much of it in Brazil, the Amazon is the largest rainforest in the world. It is the richest and most varied biological reservoir, containing several million species of insects, plants, birds, and other forms of life, some still unrecognized by science. With its lush vegetation and its wide variety of trees, scientists say the Amazon rainforest produces more than 20% of the world's oxygen. But rapid deforestation remains a big concern. Positive steps were taken in the 1980s and 90s to reduce the number of trees being cut down, but illegal logging and mining has risen sharply. The Amazon lost more than 500 square miles of rainforest in the month of July alone. And in the past 50 years, about 20% of the Amazon, some 300,000 square miles, have been lost. If another 20% of the rainforest disappears, scientists say it would be a tipping point for the Amazon as we know it. It would cause up to 140 billion tons of stored carbon to be released into the atmosphere, accelerating the rise in global temperatures. My next guest may have some cautiously good news. She says it's not too late to deal with the effects of climate change, but, and there is a but, only if we act now. Dr. Pamela McElwee is one of the lead authors of the UN's IPCC climate report. She's an associate professor in the School of Environmental and Biological Sciences at Rutgers University. She's also the author of an award-winning book called Forests Are Gold. Dr. Pamela McElwee joins us via Skype from Metuchen, New Jersey. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you for having me.
Well, when I first started getting research for this show, Doctor, the first thing I want to say, is it too late? But you seem to say that it's not too late if we act now, so tell me.
Absolutely. It's up to us how bad climate change gets. So as your correspondent noted, we're just under about 1 degree Celsius temperature rise so far. That's a global average. What we found in our recent IPCC report, though, is that we're warming faster over land. And we can see that. We can see wildfires in Russia right now. We can see all sorts of effects on our agricultural production systems all around the world. So we're already seeing the impacts of just that 1 degree temperature rise. So that warns us that we don't want to get much higher. We definitely don't want to get beyond 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees Celsius, because the risks that come with those increases are very, very significant.
It seems that these fires, though, I mean, I don't know if I'm imagining, but the fires are much worse this summer. I was recently in Alaska, and you can see fires for miles. I know that Russia's got fires. I mean, the fires seem to be spreading, without abandon.
Absolutely. So when I mentioned that some areas are warming faster than others, it's in those boreal and polar regions where we see those rapid increases. So, for example, Alaska is about 5 degrees Celsius warmer than normal this summer, above the average for summers. Russia is about 6 degrees Celsius. That's about 10 degrees Fahrenheit above normal for summer temperatures. So then it makes those areas much more vulnerable to those wide-scale fires that we're seeing this summer, which have devastating consequences in terms of the smoke and so forth that they put forth.
All right, now let me go to the Amazon rainforest and deforestation there. There's more and more deforestation going on almost every single day to increase land for agriculture. How serious is this? Because it's been described as the lungs of the planet.
It's very serious. We know that tropical forests in particular are very good carbon stores. So we often refer to forests as being potentially both a sink and a source of CO2. And by sink, we mean those trees absorb the fossil fuel emissions that we put up. What we want to try to avoid is converting those forests into a source. That is, the forests themselves disappear, or they're burned, or they're plowed under, and then they release the CO2 into the atmosphere. So we want to try to keep those tropical forests as sinks to help us absorb our fossil fuel emissions.
How do you tell, though, the people of Brazil, for instance, the president of Brazil, is that please don't cut those down? And I suppose the reply is, well, we need more land because we need to feed our population, plus China has a growing appetite for our products, and we want to keep our economy going. I mean, how do you convince a country that they should not do this?
Well, we know what works because actually this rise in deforestation in Brazil has accompanied the new president. He's been very vocal about wanting to open the Amazon back up to agricultural exploitation. But prior to his administration, Brazil was actually doing a very good job of slowing deforestation. And they did that through a variety of means. They had very good satellite measurements that could tell them where there might be some illegal logging so they could move very quickly. They also had payment programs where they would pay indigenous groups or farmers to actually conserve forests. And so that made it economically viable for them to keep those trees standing. So we know what Brazil can do. It's just a matter of finding the political will to do it.
All right, yeah, and preparing for the show, I discovered that there's some countries that are planting millions and millions of trees, whether it's Ethiopia or India. Is planting trees, I shouldn't say the solution, but certainly a huge step forward?
It's part of the solution. We know that land can actually help us do a lot in terms of mitigating our fossil fuel emissions, but we can't do it alone. We have to tackle both land-related issues, but we also have to tackle our fossil fuel emissions. So planting trees is great. We get a lot of co-benefits from them. In some places, trees are used to produce biomass for energy, food for people, hedgerows to protect soil. So there's lots of benefits from trees. The problem becomes when we try to plant enough trees to make up for our fossil fuel emissions, then we might start getting into some land competition issues. That is, planting trees on land that could be used for agriculture. That's a trade-off that we want to try to avoid.
Are you seeing enthusiasm worldwide to try to do something, or are you discouraged?
I can't be discouraged because everybody has a role to play. And I have to say one of the things that's been most surprising and encouraging recently are the student strikes. The students have really taken upon themselves in the last few months to highlight a lot of these issues that scientists have been warning about for decades, really. And it's the students that are bringing more and more attention to some of the findings that we've been able to put forth. So that gives me hope.
Is there any country you give a gold star to at this point, the one that's sort of a model that we can look to? I mean, who's leading the way?
Well, every country can do better. So there's no country right now that's 100% carbon neutral. Now, some countries have pledged that they would like to keep that as a goal. And what that would mean is they would have to go to 100% renewable energy, or as close as they could, and then maybe make up that last 10 or 20% through various land activities, maybe reforestation and so forth. So some countries have pledged that carbon neutrality. Costa Rica is one of them. But they're not quite there yet. They've got more to do. And certainly countries like the US, there's a lot of opportunities for us, both in the industrial sector, but also in the land sector. Right now, there's a lot of presidential candidates in Iowa, and Iowa farmers actually could have a really large role to play in encouraging, for example, soil conserving practices that would keep more carbon in our soil. That'd be a great step.
Dr. Pamela McElwee, thank you for joining us, one of the lead authors of the IPCC Climate Report.
Thanks for having me.
And large sections of forest and jungle around the world, has noted, are being devoured by loggers. Studies show that deforestation impacts our planet in many ways, including reducing oxygen levels. But there is a growing movement to counteract this growing deforestation, one tree at a time. Plugged In's Larry Lazo has our report.
Excessive tree cutting has depleted Ethiopia's forests and expanded its deserts, contributing to a rise in temperatures, shortage of water, and demise of several animal species. According to the United Nations, forest coverage in Ethiopia was at about 35% in the 20th century. It stands at about 4% today.
The issue of environment is of major concern, even at the global level, but more so for this country. Most of the problems and famine we see in this country could be linked to the lack of protection for our environment.
Seeing the urgency firsthand, Ethiopia launched its Green Legacy Initiative in May with the goal of planting 4 billion trees across the country by October. Agricultural officials say more than 2.6 billion trees have been planted thus far.
The rate of deforestation and the expansion of desertification, even at a global level, is because of the destruction of forests. This country was rich with forests before, but now it has been destroyed. So this is a good opportunity to bring it back to where it was.
Not to be outdone, India has millions of volunteers planting trees. Their goal is to increase its forest by 5 million hectares before 2030. And China has one of the world's most ambitious tree planting programs, known as the Great Green Wall, designed to hold back the expansion of the Gobi Desert. And in the United States, an effort is underway near Los Angeles to grow grass, shrubs, plants, and of course, trees.
Because we know trees have multiple benefits. Trees will shade humans, the environment, as we see increases and dramatic increases in extreme heat. Trees help retain water in situations where there's flooding or we're trying to prevent water runoff.
A recent study in the journal Science says new forests could capture 2/3 of the extra carbon that has entered the atmosphere from human activity. But environmental experts say that's just part of the solution.
It's one of the pieces, and another huge piece of it is reducing our energy and industry emissions. We really need both things.
In the meantime, experts say everyone can do their part to help. Larry Lazo, VOA News, Washington.
Well, planting trees is just one part of the equation. Not cutting them in the first place might be a better place to start. But according to Dr. Mark Jacobson, there are many things governments and countries can do now. Dr. Jacobson is professor of civil and environmental engineering and director of the Atmosphere Energy Program at Stanford University, and he joins us from Stanford in Northern California. Welcome, Dr. Jacobson, and let me go first to this, is that there are some countries that are powered by 98 to 100% renewable energy. Iceland, Norway, Costa Rica, Paraguay, Albania, and Tajikistan. How is it that they are able to do this?
Well, good morning, Greta. The reason they're able to do it, well, most of these countries are powered primarily by hydroelectric, although Costa Rica and Iceland also have they also have wind in the case of Costa Rica, and Iceland, they have geothermal. And in addition to those countries, there are three others. There's Kenya, and there's Scotland, and parts of Chile that are almost at 100% as well. And these are in the electric power sector, I should point out, not all their energy, but 98 to 100% of their electricity. But it's mostly hydroelectric in most of those cases.
Do you have any idea of where the United States is on that in terms of what percentage, and could we do better easily?
Yeah, sure. In terms of electricity, the United States is now actually at about 20% clean renewable energy for all its electricity. But in terms of all energy, keep in mind electricity is only about 20% of all energy. But in terms of all energy, it's around 6% of all energy in the United States is from clean renewables.
All right, what can an individual do at his or her home, assuming that he has the financial resources to do it?
Well, there are a lot of things. First, we need to eliminate, well, we want to transition electricity, transportation, heating, cooling in buildings, and industry. And in people's homes, there's the heating and cooling, and also transportation is part of the home. And so for heating, we would go to heat pumps to replace gas and oil air heaters and water heaters. And so heat pumps are much more efficient. They use 1/4 to 1/5 the energy as a gas heater or an oil heater. And lighting as well, we'd want to use more efficient lights, LEDs, for example. For stoves, instead of a gas stove, electric induction cooktop stoves. These are not the old electric resistance stoves, but induction cooktops, which boil water in half the time as gas and are efficient as well. For vehicles, we would want to use electric vehicles, which are now plentiful, and they have long range as well. And then to provide electricity, a lot of people who own homes who have control of their own roofs, they can put solar PV on rooftops. Some people can put batteries in their homes to provide electricity at night and charge it during the day with solar. If you don't own your home, if you're in an apartment complex, there are 7 states in the United States that have what are called community choice aggregation utilities, which can procure 100% renewable energy for you. Those states include California, New York, New Jersey, Ohio, Illinois, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. And other states are starting this too. And by that, so you can actually, instead of putting solar on your roof, you can actually just have the utility provide 100% renewables at a similar, pretty much exactly the same cost as your current utility is providing normal electricity.
You know, all those things sound great, but regrettably, there's a cost of conversion to all those things. I mean, even an automobile, I mean, they have some great electrical cars, but they're quite pricey, they're expensive. Even in my own home, we put solar panels on, and we had it was such a nightmare getting through all the red tape of the District of Columbia to finally get them to, allow us to basically flip the switch. And we had to get the authorization of the local electrical company, but it was a bureaucratic nightmare. And so, to what extent, our government sort of interfering with this progress, or even some who had adverse interest to people switching over to solar?
Yeah, well, let me first address the cars. So cars, electric cars, they may have a few $1,000s more upfront cost in some cases. There is a federal tax credit still of about $7,000, so that offsets that now. But the more important thing is that an electric car uses 1/4 to 1/5 the energy as a gasoline car. It actually goes 4 to 5 times the distance on the same amount of energy. And as a result, if you have a car 15 years, drive it 15,000 miles per year, you will save $20,000 in fuel costs over 15 years by going to an electric car.
Which is great unless you're living paycheck to paycheck, and I don't want to get out in the weeds, but a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck. But I get your point. If you can afford it, it's cheaper in the long run.
It's definitely cheaper, and it is a little bit more expensive, except for the tax credit does take care of that for most cars, but not all cars right now. In terms of putting solar, different states have different rules and laws. I know where I live in California, there is some red tape getting it up, but again, I put solar on my own roof in my home 2.5 years ago, and in batteries, I electrified it, no gas on the property, and as a result, and there was an upfront cost. But I have no electric bill, no natural gas bill, no gasoline bill because I have electric cars, and the utility pays me $500 for the last $550 each of the last 2 years for the extra electricity. It pays itself off after 4 to 5 years, and I have free energy for everything for the next 20 years after that.
Which is great and it's terrific, but then I bring it back to is that there are a lot of people who can't do that upfront cost to do the long-term saving, and maybe that's where where the government or the state or somebody can sort of step in to make that transition even much easier than a $7,000 tax credit.
Yeah, that's exactly true. There are some solar companies that will actually lease you the solar if they want to put it on your roof. Or again, there are the community choice aggregation utilities, which you don't even have to put any solar on your roof, no upfront cost at all. You just change your utility provider, and they will provide 100% wind and solar, geothermal, and some hydroelectric that they procure. So there are other solutions aside from putting solar.
Well, there's so much more to talk about this. I didn't even get to the issue of batteries. We'll have to do that next time, the battery storage. Dr. Mark Jacobson, the Atmosphere Energy Program at Stanford University. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Before we go, an update on a story we brought to your attention just a few months ago. The story of American journalist Austin Tice. The former U.S. Marine and now journalist was detained at a checkpoint in Syria on August 14, 2012. Tice was there on assignment to cover the escalating conflict in Syria. Since his 2012 kidnapping, there's been no communication with his captors. Tice's birthday was August 11th. He's now 37 years old. His parents continue to fight for their son's release, making frequent trips to the Middle East. The Tice parents have said they have spoken to President Donald Trump about Austin, and they said they have been assured that every effort is being made to bring their son home. Austin Tice's story serves as a reminder for all of us of the risks that some people experience for simply doing their job. That's all the time we have for today. Stay plugged in by liking us on Facebook at Voice of America. You can also like my Facebook page at facebook.com/Greta, and do follow me on Twitter at Greta. Thank you for being plugged in.